In today's video, I wanted to share some tips and techniques I use to create consistent parachute flies. So this is a parachute Adams. I'll start with that, and then I'll show you a purple haze, and the only difference in the two is the dubbing used. So for the parachute Adams, I have some gray superfine dubbing, and I'll be using some fine and dry purple dubbing, and I'll talk more about that once I get to that fly. I'll start with a standard dry fly hook. I'm using a Daiichi 1180. This is size 14. And what I've done is to pull out a lot of hooks and just create these flies. Actually, I'm tying what I call blanks. So I'll tie the part of the fly, and it'll end up looking like this. So that's the first step. And I'll start with my thread behind the eye of the hook, about 1 eye length, and just taking touching turns as I go down. I'm tying a little bit slower than I normally do. And I'm creating a base for the polywing. And I'll go back up with open spirals to the 1/3 mark. For my post, I use something called Fentex slipper and Kreft yarn, and it comes in a skein like this, the big skein, and I just clip off a part, a length that I like to use. And for my size 14 and above, I'll use a whole hank of poly, and for size 16s and below, I'll either split it in half or use 1/3 or 2/3, whatever you like the quantity for a post. So I'll tie it in. I like to start with my post, and I'll tie it in over the eye of the hook with 2 wraps here just to make sure it's tight and on top. And then I'll use touching turns to go back, and I'm a counter here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the reason I do that is for consistency. So I want all of my flies to look similar to the previous one I tied. I'll use touching turns as I go back to secure all of this. And I found that just helps me. So you'll notice that I didn't start with the tail, that I started with the wing. Many tyers start with the tail and then attach the wing later. And I tie a lot of sparkle dun mayflies, and for that I begin tying with I tie in the deer hair for the wing and then the tail. And I do that so I can get a nice tapered body as a result of that. Other tyers start here and bring it forward, and they tie in the poly wing later and to create the tapered. So whichever you like, this is just the preferred method that I use. Then I use moose for a tail. Many tyers use a combination of grizzly and brown for the tail, but I like the looks of the moose better. And I will select 5 fibers, again for consistency. I want all of my flies to look the same. And you can choose a bundle or whatever material you want. And you'll notice that I had some fuzz in here, so I'm removing that before I stack it. And I'll get my hair stacker out, put it in, tap it. And one tip I'll tell you is that as we bring this out and make sure the tips are aligned, we'll do that again. They are aligned, but one of the things that I found is if you have longer moose, these ends here, I like to cut them off close to the top of the hackle, or the hair stacker. And the reason is, as I pull this out, a lot of times you can hit the ends of those and that will make your tips unaligned at that point. And so that's just a little tip that I use. I'll use my finger and hold it onto the hair stacker and pull the fibers out. And those are mostly aligned, so we'll go with that. And I like them to be the length of the shank of the hook. And I'll use my forefinger, put it on the hook eye, and measure that. I've got one small one. I'm going to make a little bit of adjustment here. Evidently it wasn't even, so that'll be better. So I'm measuring again the shank of the hook, reposition that so it'll be that length. And you'll notice that I'm putting the moose fibers on this side of the hook towards me. I take one wrap and then pull up, take one more wrap, and you'll notice that those fibers are now on top of the hook. This is where I'll use my scissors. I tie with my scissors in hand, and so I'll use the points of the scissors to measure them and make sure that they're where I want them. I'll continue to take touching wraps backward. I'm holding the moose fibers upward at an angle that will keep them on top of the hook. And I'll go forward with touching turns to the tie-in point of the moose. Pull those fibers, hold down hard on the bobbin holder, and you can tear the fibers off and you don't have any remaining ends of the moose to worry about. Use touching open wraps then to go forward. I'll pull the wing out of the way, make one wrap here, and you can tie your post, or if you have problems with your hackle or your hair sliding over on one side, you can keep it on top by taking a thread wrap, a loose thread wrap, not super tight. If you want to flare the tips, you can pull it tight and you'll see those ends flare now. But let's do that again. I don't really want them to flare, but I'll make sure that they stay on top. I come around and I have a loose wrap, and then just secure the thread forward, and then I'll take stronger wraps, tighter wraps, and then build a thread down to help me post the wing. My next step then is to post, and I used to do them like this, but when you tie a lot, you'll find your shoulder gets tired. So what I've done recently is use my rotary vise and have it towards me, and my shoulder then thanks me for it. So I'll use touching turns on the way up. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Again, I want some consistency in the length of my parachute. And when I'm at the top, and those were soft wraps. If you pull too hard, then it'll unravel. But I'll go back around the hook shank, and then we will go up again. I just go to the top of my previous post and then go back again. You can pull this a little bit and your thread will anchor that at the proper angle. And why do I do that? When I used to tie parachutes a long time ago, I would find that my posts would flop back and forth. And so this method I learned from my friends Gretchen and Al Beatty creates a little bit of structure to that wing. And then, as I told you, I'm tying blanks, so I just finish these off with 4 turns. I trim it, and I throw it in a pile. And it looks like this. So here's some size 14s and 16s that I've been tying. There's probably 5 dozen size 14 and maybe 4 dozen 16s that I'm tying a combination of parachute Adams and purple haze. So once I've done all of those, and I do that for a reason, as I mentioned, you'll find that your flies are much more consistent as you just do those 2 steps. Pull out 6 hooks, pull out 12 hooks, and tie some of your parachutes, and I think you'll be amazed at how consistent they look. So I would take that out of the vise, put it in the pile, and once I'm ready to tie the remaining part of the fly, I'll reattach the thread. I use 3 turns there, and I'll have my hackle pre-selected. So I have some brown and grizzly. And you'll need to make a decision about whether you want there's 2 sides of hackle. There's a shiny side and a dull side. So do you want the shiny side down, or do you want the shiny side up? The fish won't care, but it depends on your hackle. And this is an example of a cupped hackle that is actually kind of extending down. So it's going down below on either side of the stem. It's not perfectly flat, like much more to the point of what the brown is. So the problem is, as you start to wind that down, the prior wrap, those barbs might get caught up in the subsequent wrap as you're doing that. So I tie them this direction with the shiny side down, and that prevents them from getting wrapped up or bound. So I'll start with my brown. You can tie in either, it doesn't make a difference. So I prefer the brown. I'll take 2 wraps and then make a secure wrap for the post. And I'll do the same with the grizzly hackle. Make a wrap or 2, and then we'll go up. This is called posting the hackle. We'll go to the top and down, and then secure those ends, and go to the back. So the reason you leave some empty space, you pull the barbs off, so when you start to wrap your hackle, they aren't splaying in every different direction. You have a little bit of control with that. So that's why I've pulled those barbs out. Next we'll use some superfine dubbing in gray. And I like a slim profile body, so I use a little bit at a time. And I prefer the superfine dubbing for my flies. I can create a very slim profile body, and that really aligns to what the natural insect is. You'll see I have some bare thread here, and you can use that then to wrap backwards and get to the point where your tail begins. Hold on to the tail so that your wrap doesn't push it over to the side, and then we'll start wrapping this forward, trying to keep it out of the post material. You can use your finger there and do it, make an angle. We'll make one more wrap here. There's a little bit of room. I'll go forward to the eye and then back towards the post, creating a little bit of a taper. And now I'll go figure 8 around the post to cover up the body on both sides. I end with my thread behind the post, and I'll use that as I tie off the hackle. I'll show you in a moment. I use some Zap-A-Gap in order to secure this might secure the hackle around the post a little bit more. Sometimes the fish's teeth will break those. And I'll get that little piece out. And then I'll pull the hackle down, make sure that all that poly is up and out of the way, and we will begin to wrap the post. And you notice that it's going parallel to the hook shank. Each subsequent wrap is below the previous one. I don't know what's going on with that barbule there. There's 3 wraps, so that's 6 total. Now it's kind of another half of a wrap. And then I'll pull these out of the way down and wrap around the post with wiggling your thread, so you're trying not to bind down any of the barbules. That's 3 wraps that will hold it, keep it tight, and then pull your hackle fibers out of the way. And I take 2 turns of hackle, or 2 turns of thread. And the reason is, occasionally when I'm making a whip finish, it might slip off the behind the eye of the hook, and having that extra thread wrap will make sure that it stays there. And I'll complete a 5-turn whip finish then. And we'll trim the thread just by holding the scissor tip, or the scissor blade right along the thread. And then we'll trim out the hackle. Let's see if I bound down any fibers here. Maybe one in there. And then the only thing remaining is to trim the posts to the desired length. And it's usually the length of the body shank, and that's just an eyeball for me. So I just come in and trim it. And that will finish your fly. Put a dab of head cement right there, and you're finished. So let me grab another one of my blanks, and let's quickly tie a purple haze using the fine and dry dubbing. So again, you'll see my consistency. We'll quickly tie this one. Tie it in front and post that with a wrap. Pull the barbs off my grizzly. A couple of wraps there. And then we'll post the hackle around tie the hackle around the post and back down. Get that little edge there. And then go to the back. And now I'll show you some of the purple dubbing. So this is the fine and dry, and this is superfine. So you notice that the superfine is straighter. I think it's a little bit finer in diameter each fiber, and it's just much easier to dub. If you use this dubbing, which I have, I had a whole package, and you see that I don't use much at all. So I've had this for quite a while, and I'm just trying to use it up. But it's not as consistent as I'm trying to dub it, or dub it around my thread. So this body will be perhaps a little bit thicker than what the parachute Adams is, but I'm not sure I don't think the fish care a lot. So in this case, I'm starting my dubbing a little bit before where the tail is tied in, and I'll go forward. And the reason is there's a little bit of fibers sticking out maybe, and so that's a way that I'm able to capture those, I've found, by tying a lot of these. You can see already that the diameter of the body is a little bit thicker than using superfine dubbing. If you're new to tying, I would prefer the superfine, so just buy that the first time and then you won't have this problem. Or if you like the looks of it, then go ahead and use the fine and dry for this particular fly. So I'll keep going forward, almost to the post. We'll go to the eye of the hook and then wrap backwards, and then figure 8 wraps ending behind the post, and I'll put a dab of Zap-A-Gap right on the post, and pull the hackle down parallel. Make sure all those poly fibers are out of the way. Go underneath. And we'll use 3 wraps. Wiggle your thread. And place 2 wraps around the eye of the hook. And use a 5-turn whip finish. We'll cut the thread and the hackle. Trim those, as well as the post to length. And there's a purple haze. And back to the parachute Adams. I don't know if you can tell, but if you look at the diameter of the bodies using the different dubbing material, it makes a difference on your bodies. So hope this helps you. I'd encourage you to pull out 6 or 12 hooks and tie in the wing and the tail, and I think if you do that, you'll notice that by repetition you'll end up with a more consistent fly. So I hope that's helped you. If it has, please like and subscribe to my RiverKeeper Fly YouTube channel, and I hope to see you in the near future.